So it is October. You know what that means? Baseball. With it being the end of October, I thought, what do I do? I've never been able to tell at Guild at the end of October. And it's baseball. In fact, tonight is game 1 of the World Series. But it's also October, and we're less than a week from Halloween. And so what do? There's this dilemma, and I didn't know which direction to go until I really began to think, because it was a few weeks ago that my beloved Los Angeles Dodgers bowed out of the Major League Baseball playoffs early, and so they will not be participating in the World Series tonight for the first time in 3 years. And so my mourning that has taken place for the last 365 days when we lost in the World Series last year is going to continue for another 365 days. Last year we lost to the Boston Red Sox. We lost in Fenway Park. And if you know anything about baseball, you know anything about the Red Sox and Fenway Park, they have a tradition at Fenway that they do. And I've got to tell you, for the last 365 days, every time I hear Neil Diamond sing Sweet Caroline, bum, 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 good times never felt so good. Some of you know the Boston Red Sox and what they do at Fenway Park. I can't stand it. Oh, it drives me crazy. So thanks a lot for just rubbing that in. I've been mourning, and I'm going to have to continue mourning. And so I couldn't decide, do I tell a baseball story to kind of help ease my pain, or do I go with a scary story as we're heading closer and closer to Halloween? After thinking about it and deliberating, I decided, why don't I just do both? About 50 miles outside of the city of Las Vegas, Nevada, right outside on the outskirts of Pahrump, Nevada, as you're traveling down a small highway, there is a place that is the home of one of the greatest urban legends in the southern Nevada area. There's a place just outside of Pahrump, 50 miles outside of Las Vegas, in the middle of the Mojave Desert, called Cathedral Canyon. Now, when you go home tonight, go onto your internet and type in Cathedral Canyon, Las Vegas, Nevada into your Google search. You'll find videos and articles all over. You'll find YouTube videos of people taking you on a video tour of the place back when it was still in existence so that you can verify everything that I'm about to tell you. It's a magnificent place. See, in 1942, Wiley Armstrong came from Boston. He moved to Las Vegas, Nevada because he was looking to strike it rich and start a new life for himself. His wife had died, and so he took his small young son and moved from the East Coast to the desert of southern Nevada to start a new life. He purchased about 40 acres of land right outside of Pahrump, Nevada. He didn't realize that those 40 acres of land that he purchased were on an ancient Indian burial ground. Now, growing up in Las Vegas, I'd heard the stories of Wiley. I'd heard the urban legends of his Cathedral Canyon. But it wasn't until my junior year of high school that I actually went there for myself. You see, Wiley moved to Las Vegas in the early 1940s to start this new life with his young son. But soon after moving to the area of Pahrump, his son got sick. Now, his son was an avid baseball fan, and they would spend most of their afternoons in the backyard throwing the ball back and forth. Having come from Boston, his son was never seen without his Red Sox cap. But his son got sick, and after doing everything that he could to try to nurse his son back to health, spending every last dime that he had on medical care, at the age of 8, Wiley's son passed away. And so he took this plot of land, and he decided he wanted to make a monument to his son, and also to their faith that brought them so close together and gave him strength through his loss. He took this place on his land that there was a natural ravine, a natural canyon, and he spent over $75,000 of his own money over the course of the next several years and created a monument that he called Cathedral Canyon. Now, the urban legend goes that his 8-year-old son still walks through that cathedral. That if you're there on a night when the moon is full and breaking through the clouds, that you will see Wiley's son. And he will beg you plead with you to play ball. It's just an urban legend. My junior year of high school, I had an adult youth worker in our church. He led a small group of me and a few of my friends that he asked if we'd ever been to Cathedral Canyon, and none of us ever had. So he said, let's go one night. And so on a Friday night, we loaded up and we drove the hour out through the desert, turned onto the old dirt road, followed the small little signs for Cathedral Canyon, pulled into the gravel parking lot, and I was taken aback. You see, you're far enough away from the city that the city lights don't flood away the stars. And it's one of the first times in my life that I'd seen the Milky Way. You walk up. It's so dark that you can't see what's happening except for a 40-foot replica of Christ the Redeemer of the Andes statue towering over the canyon. Wiley had created a swinging bridge that went across the canyon, across the gorge, about 40 yards across in depth. The canyon plummets 60 feet down to the canyon floor. And he hand-built wooden stairs that weave their way down to the dirt canyon floor below. At the top of the canyon, where the stairs are and where you can cross the swinging bridge, there's an old electrical box. There's no cover on it. There's just a lever that you can take and you can push it up. And when you do, the entire canyon comes to life. You see, Wiley himself had wired it with electricity. He put old Victorian lanterns placed all throughout the canyon, and he wired it with speakers. And so when you're there in the middle of the night, it becomes eerily silent. And when you push that lever, the lights begin to flicker and glow, and through the speakers, an eerie, omniscient music begins to play. Echoes through the canyon walls. You make your way down those stairs into the canyon, and there are monuments all around. Wiley carved out of the stone big holes that he then put in recessed stained glass with lanterns behind them that shine through, creating beautiful images. There is a well that he dug out and put in a fountain base with a pump that when you turn on the electricity to the place, water starts to pour. There's an image of Jesus. There's an image of Buddha. There's an image of many other religious sacred people scattered throughout, an ode to the faiths of the world. And then there's a picture, framed and outlined in a gold frame, a glass plexiglass sheet over it, with a picture of his 8-year-old son wearing his Boston Red Sox baseball cap. Underneath it, it says, "For my boy." At the bottom of the canyon, as you're walking and making your way, meandering through, stopping at all of the different locations to see all of the different artifacts. There are poems, there are song lyrics. There's one that says, "May all who enter here be blessed by the great spirits above." And there's a grave to Hayun, the last of the Indian rebels, who was buried there on that very site. Now, over the course of my last 2 years of high school, I would go to Cathedral Canyon all the time. We would go several times a year. Sometimes I would even go by myself because it was a place of solitude. It was a place of rest. It was a place of reverence. One evening, towards the end of my senior year of high school, my friend Matt and I decided that we wanted to go. It was a Friday night. It was at the end of October, and we said, why don't we just go out to Cathedral Canyon? We have nothing else to do. There's not much to do in the city of Las Vegas. So we hopped in the car late on a Friday night, and we began to drive out an hour into the middle of the desert. All of the times that I'd been there, I'd never seen another soul, and this night was no different. We flipped the switch, lighting up the canyon below, and we made our way down. Matt went to the left, I went to the right, just to spend some time in solitude. I noticed that it was brighter than usual, even with the Victorian lanterns flickering and flashing their light around the different landscapes. And that's when I noticed the full moon that was breaking through the clouds above. It gave a very eerie, kind of odd feeling that hovered over the entire canyon. As I was looking at the picture of the young boy with his Red Sox cap, I heard a sound that eerily sounded familiar. I grew up playing baseball with my dad in the backyard and my little brother, and so I knew the sound. It sounded like a ball was rolling towards me on the dirt. And then I felt something hit the back of my heel. It was very noticeable, and in fact, it stung a little bit with the weight of the ball hitting, and I turned around thinking that was strange, but there was nobody behind me. I looked down to see a ball, and of course there wasn't one, but as I looked through the fainting light of the lanterns, I could see a trail coming down the pathway, as if a ball had rolled. "Matt, where are you? Is this some kind of a joke?" He didn't answer. "Matt, where are you?" After a few minutes, he yelled from probably 20, 30 yards away. I just shrugged it off and laughed and moved on down to look at the next artifact and pay my respects. It's when I heard it again, and I felt it again. I turned and looked, and once again there was no ball to be seen, but I could see a trail to where it sure appeared that a ball had rolled. And that's when I heard it. A soft little voice like that of an 8-year-old child that simply just said, "Play with me." Well, that was it. I'd had enough. I told Matt, "Let's get out of here." He laughed at me for being such a chicken. We ran back up those stairs, flipped the lights off, got into our car, and began making our way back towards home. When we got out onto the main highway that takes you from Pahrump to Las Vegas, there was a fog that had rolled in, very uncharacteristic for the atmosphere and the weather there in southern Nevada. It was so thick that not being used to that, I turned on my high beams to try to be able to break through the fog, which only made it worse. So I turned them off, and we were driving, creeping along the highway, trying to make our way home, when up ahead through the fog, I could see flickering and flashing lights. If you've ever seen police and ambulance lights through the fog, you know that it creates this illusion of grandeur, that there's more there and it's larger and bigger than it was. As we got closer, there were policemen flagging everyone down to slow. There'd been a horrible, horrible accident on the highway ahead. The fog had caused 2 cars to careen and clash head-on with each other. As we were directed slowly under the shoulder of the road to go past, I looked over and saw that there was a sheet covering one of the bodies out of the car. As I looked through the fog and the haze, I noticed laying on the ground next to the sheet, just outside of its reach, was a baseball hat with a big red B. As the officers ushered us through, I felt this sense of anxiety. There was a quietness. Matt and I hadn't said a word our entire trip, and I said, "We need to break this. Let's turn on the radio." I flipped on the radio, and as soon as I did, what I heard took my breath away. "Sweet Caroline, bum, bum, bum."